Well, I love this conversation because it certainly got us thinking about a lot of different things.
Yes,
But I
yes.
think the big overarching grasp of this conversation is that we are affected by the environment that we live in. And every choice we make is a choice. And so if we're just, drifting aimlessly and we're not paying attention, it could be affecting our health in long term effects. And like you said, it's three
100%.
generations down the road. And
100%. And sorry to just add this, but the thing that I think is so vital, and I want everyone to take this away from this conversation, is the fact that when it comes to fertility, especially whether it's inability to conceive, inability to keep a healthy pregnancy to term, just general reproduction, there is no such thing as a neutral exposure. Okay. There's nothing that you will do that will just have no exposure. Every single thing that you will do will be a positive exposure or will be a negative exposure. There's nothing that's just going to be in the middle. So, for example, what do I mean by that? Well, you might say on the conversation of filtered water, unfiltered water is going to have a negative, it's going to be a negative exposure, right? But then there's degrees because is it better than alcohol for fertility? Yes, it is. Right. So, rather
so
than
there's
saying,
alcohol and then there's unfiltered water and then there's
there's
filtered water.
exactly. So I say, there's alcohol, unfiltered water, filtered water. So, the reality is that in that kind of spectrum, you will have different levels of exposure of positive and negative as well.
And what I hear you saying is make the better bad choice.
Exactly. Always make the best possible choice you can. There won't be a perfect choice. We're not going to be able to make that choice consistently every single time, right? But if in the situation that you find yourself in, there is a way of making a slightly better choice than a worse one, then make the slightly better one, right? And know that you're working towards improving that every single time. I think that's a really good way of going about it because, and in some instances, I will say this as a clinician and as a fertility specialist, who specifically helps couples overcome infertility and miscarriage, there are situations that I will have to say, no, you cannot make this choice. Like you have to make this other choice because otherwise what you're telling me that you want, which is a baby, is just not going to happen, right? There have been situations I have had to tell people over the years, no, you have to change jobs. There is absolutely, for you, there is absolutely no other way. So, you either do that or you have no baby. And that's also a choice.
Well, and
Right.
I think there's something to be said about that because there are some children that are brought into the earth under circumstances where the parents were not careful with their health or they made poor choices about their health and it affected the children. And the children had all kinds of, they had to be incubated or they were born prematurely or they had health challenges that chased them around for the next several years of their lives and all those things. And so I have to start thinking in terms of we only have one version of us. And if we are going to reproduce, it's probably a good idea to be on high alert about the things that we eat and the things that we drink and the things that we breathe and the cleaning chemicals that we use so that we are giving ourselves, and like you said, three generations down the road, the best chance possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The best, really truly, the best start in life starts way before life starts. And so, it's about being deliberate. It's about being aware. It's about being prepared. I think that to a huge extent. And look, there are different types of populations and subpopulations, underpopulations, right? There are situations where, for the most part, like I started this conversation, in the general population out there, people conceive without trying. Really, people have one night stands, drunken one night stands, and get pregnant. That is
True.
literally how most people, no, I'm serious. That is how most people get pregnant, right? However, there are subpopulations within populations. There are then the people who the drunken night, one night stand is not going to do the thing, right? And the really diligent, eating healthy, organic, and this and that still is not doing the same, right? So there's those layers, those variations that we were talking about of best choices and not so great choices. And for couples who struggle to have, a healthy pregnancy, they are a different type of population. They're a population that needs to be looked at in a very different way. But that's the important thing to realize is that for some people, the threshold is much lower than for other people,
Mhm.
right? And so there is no point in trying to compare yourself if you've had the drunken one night stand with the person who is not having the same luck, right? After years of trying, having done multiple different things to achieve that outcome. It's just different people. Like you're comparing watermelons with, peaches. They're very different things. They're both fruit, but they are very different fruit, right?